All right, take two. My name's Jeff Prentice, and I thought it would be productive to walk around and look at things around us and talk about positive and negative space and symmetry and asymmetry. Two fairly simple concepts that are really common in manufactured items, in nature, and in advertising. And yet people can get confused also by these concepts. So let's just walk around and see if we can clarify some of these ideas and concepts as they appear around us. Now, there's different types of symmetry that we're covering all over crystallographic. There's radial symmetry. I'm going to be talking more about formal symmetry. You know, a lot of things that are man-made are symmetrical for a reason, right? Like you don't want an asymmetrical car. You want all four tires to be equally spaced. Same thing with a swing set. You generally want a swing set to be symmetrical. And what do I mean by symmetrical? I mean that you can cut it down the middle and have it be a mirror image. In this case, we'd have to be looking at it from the side, you know, to get more of an idea. There we go. However, with the placement, with lacking a couple of these swings here, and with the placement of that big thing over there, all of a sudden it becomes balanced, heavier on one side, and it becomes asymmetrical. Let's take a look at a composter. A composter needs to be rotated, okay? You don't want an asymmetrical, imbalanced, heavier on one side thing for a composter, right? Look at, cut it down the middle, mirror image, right? Now, let's look at a bird cage. Bird cage is pretty symmetrical as well. Why is it symmetrical? A bird cage could be asymmetrical. It'd be totally cool to have an asymmetrical bird cage, but you can't mass produce asymmetrical bird cages as easily, right? So, sometimes it comes down to a matter of making it is easier symmetrical. Look at this really cool remnant of a blossom from a succulent, okay? Asymmetrical. It starts out with a central structure and then it branches out with all these wonderful kind of, you know, free-flowing, more dynamic kinds of structures. That would be asymmetry. I don't know why that plant picked asymmetry over symmetry. It just did. A shovel is going to be symmetrical. Can you imagine digging with an asymmetrical shovel? Barbecue is symmetrical. Now you could totally have an asymmetrical barbecue, but how hard would it be to manufacture, right? So there's a reason behind symmetrical structures. Notice how stable it is. A lot of times things in nature are symmetrical. I'm symmetrical. You cut me down the middle, I'm pretty much a mirror image. Why would a pepper tree be so asymmetrical? There's probably a reason. Maybe it's because as these asymmetrical branches get heavy and break off, it creates more room for more trees to sprout up. I don't know. There's an old parking lot lamp that I just bought at a garage sale. Symmetrical or asymmetrical? Symmetrical. Easy to manufacture, and it distributes light evenly in the parking lot. Although these globes now, one's kind of broken and one's almost completely gone, that makes it more asymmetrical. You are going to find that there are things that are kind of in between symmetrical and asymmetrical, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So here we have some cactus. These are, what, symmetrical or asymmetrical? Can you cut them down the middle and have them be a perfect mirror image? No. So they're somewhat asymmetrical. But they're also kind of formally balanced. You know, it behooves this plant to start off with a main trunk and then send off these shoots. So, you know, it's not the most asymmetrical thing I've ever seen. When I built this chicken coop, I tried to make it as symmetrical as possible. Why? Because I didn't want it leaning and falling over. I wanted it to be a basic structure that would house my symmetrical chickens. Okay, let's end with this tree. This tree is, you know, some trees are fairly symmetrical, but this one you can see you can't cut it down the middle and have it be a perfect mirror image of itself. So it thrusts out. It's much more weighted on one side than it is the other. I think if you wanted to draw a conclusion between, you know, symmetry and asymmetry, it would be that symmetry provides structure and stability a more formal kind of presentation. Asymmetry is much more dynamic, it's much more energy, there's much more movement. So, when you are making a design, okay, so when you're making a design and you want something with movement, that's dynamic, that's maybe you're selling a product that has to do with sports, or you want it to be exciting, what are you going to pick? Okay, if you're a financial institution, if you're a church, if you're the guardian of someone's soul, do you want a dynamic, thrusting, asymmetrical kind of a structure? Maybe, but you'll notice that a lot of banks and churches are very symmetrical. So these are the concepts of symmetry and asymmetry. Let's move on to positive and negative space. Positive form, right? Here's the ladder, the positive form. And when we're making designs, a lot of times people are just focused on putting these positive forms into the composition. Negative space. Negative space, some people think negative space is way back there. Well, I mean, that's the background. Negative space is the space in between these structures. You'll notice how this makes a shape. This shape that we see inside of this ladder is just as important as the ladder, okay, in a composition. Okay, let's look at these flowers. Really nice, right? Positive form. Negative space. So in our designs throughout the course, what I'm going to be looking at when I'm critiquing your work is to try to break away from the tendency to just put flowers and lanterns and planters and things in the composition. And I am going to be talking about how interesting is the negative space. Have you been addressing the negative space? Did you look at the space between these flowers and see how interesting it is? Would it be more interesting if you put, another flower in front? By the way, this would be overlapping and this would create depth. All right, so now that we've walked around and talked about symmetry and asymmetry outside, let's go, this is my website, jeffprentice.net. And here I've got my image library, and you can see here I've got architecture, design, new media, photography, studio, sculpture, resources, etc. Because I like to collect things and look at them. Let's look at some ads now and ask ourselves, a lot of you are photographers. So, but we're going to be looking at design still, commercial designs, and trying to kind of apply what we were talking about outside, inside. So, symmetrical or asymmetrical? Well, asymmetrical pretty much, isn't it? Movement, dynamic, colorful, engaging, right? A lot of things we could be talking about. Hold on. I don't know. I mean, the subtext here too is take a look at, the stuff I'm collecting just for myself, architecture and interiors, ancient art, medieval art. You gotta know it. There's a famous quote about being an author. As an author has to know a little bit about everything. And I think that's true about a designer too. Ooh, Trinity Ale labels. What are these? So, now, here's a good example of what I was mentioning outside. You're going to see this all the time in advertising. A symmetrical structure, okay, that provides a stable kind of environment into which is placed an asymmetrical element, okay? Here's a symmetrical structure, a label, and then they have Trinity in there with a little, offset kind of flourish. Okay, so asymmetry, flourish, symmetry, government warnings, right? Here's a great one that we use for contrast. This just gives you an idea when we get into contrast, overlapping things. Just the word fragile on top of a shark, which does not look very fragile. Contrast, right? Asymmetry, lunging in from the side. Right, counterbalanced by the angle of this fragile stamp, right? And then, some symmetrical kinds of things, kind of holding things together, right? But again, asymmetry. You're going to see a lot of asymmetry in advertising. I bet, though, if you went back historically and looked at ads, you would see more symmetry. Here's a symmetrical design, right? A Rorschach ink blot kind of tongue-in-cheek reference. But you can see also here when we get into the Gestalt principles, be looking at stuff like this. Look at the wonderful kind of way that these things come out. But again, very symmetrical. Covers of magazines, let's look. Asymmetrical. Look how this palm tree kind of points up to, you see this structure and then points up to the title there. Let's see what else we can find for symmetry as we just browse around. Asymmetry. Look at all, this is all his stuff. White space, the person, you know, the subject of the ad, but asymmetrically presented, right? How about money? You know, a lot of money, if you look at our money, the United States money, it's very symmetrical, right? Kind of boring. Some of this, you know, foreign money is great. Look at this, very asymmetrical, all balanced over on this side. Of course, there's a watermark over here that you can't see. But again, this is a wonderful example of asymmetry. And we could actually take this in and turn it into a design. What I want you to be thinking about as we look at these is how can you translate this into a design using basic shapes, okay? And that'll be the next thing. Just a couple more to kind of end this. Asymmetry. What we're going to do in the next tutorial is take some of these into Photoshop and convert them into basic designs, okay? Well, before we do that, I know a lot of you are photography majors, so, you know, I collect I'm a photographer as well, and I love photography. But you can see here, you know, kind of a symmetrical kind of presentation here, more formal. Here's a real great photo. You can see here, let me look for, here's kind of a document, you know, I mean, very asymmetrical movement, you know, telling the story. A lot of times in photography, you're going to find, you know, I would have you analyze photographs out there and ask yourself, is it symmetrical or asymmetrical? Okay, so let's end this in Photoshop because I want to make the transition from walking around and looking at symmetry and then looking at symmetry and asymmetry and negative space, all the things we're discussing in commercial applications. And then how do you translate it into our design course where we're just using black and white and not even any gray for 3 weeks, okay? Now, one thing I might consider is, here I've got this in a layer, right? And I've got another layer here, and I'm going to fill it with white just by hitting Command-Delete and filling it with my background color. And then I'm going to change that opacity to be about 80% just by hitting the keys on my keyboard. Now, I kind of wish I had my pen here. Okay, and when I'm talking about a pen, I'm talking about my Wacom pen. All right, you see that? This, $100 for this in the tablet, and you can draw in Photoshop instead of using a brick, what we call a brick, you know, the mouse. So, let's get back to this. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to translate this into basic shapes. First of all, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to make this into a basic shape. Okay, so you know, I'm going to go a little bit fast here because I kind of, you know, I don't have that much time, and I could make these forms pretty, you know, I could use this tool here. I'm just going to use some real basic geometry and just see how it comes out. Okay. I want to analyze this at its most, you know, I was thinking about this the other night. Kind of looks like a person there. What we're doing in a way in this course in the first 3 weeks, we're talking about skeletons. We're talking about skeletal structures. Okay. Here I'm going to create a vector shape, all right, which I will talk about later. Boy, that's a really thick vector shape. Well, that's fine, whatever. I am going to be talking to you about raster shapes, and whoa, I didn't want that. Not 1 inch, 1 pixel. I'm going to be talking to you about the difference between raster and vector. Now, I am holding down my shift key as I use my line tool, okay? And I'm just playing with some of these forms. I'm trying to think of an abstract composition. Remember, I'm not trying to create a scene with a car with an old Corvette and cactus in it, okay? and with this abstract person in it now. I want to think as an abstract composition. Really what I should do is turn it upside down. Image, rotation. How about we flip it vertical? All right. Now we can start looking at these shapes completely differently. Oh, am I working on different layers? Apparently not. Now, see, that's not smart. Let me just, whoops. Let me kind of, I see this as like I want to outline it. Edit stroke. This is a really good way to create a border as well. I'll be showing you that. Okay. And now I can move these things around. Let me pause it for a second. Boy, I really want to see it the way it was. You know, there's part of my brain that says flip it back over. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to hide the photograph and just look now at my composition. And I can't help it. I've got to flip it. I got to flip it back and see it. Okay. Now, if I was going to present this in the class, in other words, I'm talking about kind of here how I've looked at a photograph or composition, and I've broken it down into tall verticals, you know, punctuated with a circular form, hard edge geometry. This vertical is contrasting with this horizontal. I've got variety of line, thick line, thinner line. I can't help but see this as a desert landscape kind of, right? But I'm on my way now to creating an abstract composition. So hopefully you can see the evolution in the thought process. Hopefully here you can see the why. We're going to do it in reverse. We're going to be building these things, right, to develop our skill in designing these things, all right?